When we talk about resilience in space or space flight, human space flight, we have to keep all of these different scenarios in mind, because it's important to ask resilience towards what, or resilience, against what. Each of these scenarios is very different, has different parameters, has different risks. So we have to think about all of those types of things. And that's where these 5 spaceflight hazards come in. But NASA defines 5 major categories of hazards of spaceflight towards the human system, or the person. Altered gravity is the most obvious one, that there's vestibular changes in your inner ear. There's fluid shifting going on where, without the pull of gravity downwards, kind of fluids can shift upwards. There's deconditioning because you're not using all your muscles. There's muscle atrophy. There's bone loss because of that loss of gravity. Various physiological type changes happen because of altered gravity. So you can talk about resilience to those physiological type of changes. There's the hostile closed environment, which really means that you're kind of living in a tin can. It's a closed environment where you're not getting inputs really out from other sources. You're not connected physically to other things like the ground, and it's a hostile environment in the sense that the environment outside of your vehicle is incompatible with life in some way. So this is implications for kind of how the vehicle is designed itself, whether it's designed around the human, or the human is kind of forced into the system that isn't really designed well for them. There's all kinds of acceleration, noise, vibration, toxic chemicals that can happen with rocket fuel and coolants and you name it, right, just to keep these systems going. But then there's also internally, you have a closed loop system for water filtration, your food system, and also within that kind of a risk of decreased immune functioning because you're kind of in this closed off bubble, right? Space radiation is another one that we think about more and more the further and further we go from Earth. We're protected, relatively in low Earth orbit by the Earth's magnetosphere, but further and further out, we're less protected, and so we have to think about that kind of risk and any resiliency that we can build into the system for that. As well as distance from Earth, that right now in low Earth orbit, we can resupply, we can have regular communications back and forth, we can video chat, we can Zoom, or the equivalent of Zoom to space, right? You can get a phone call in your car from space, like Jeff was saying. The farther and farther we go, the less and less communication ability we're going to have. That bigger and bigger distances away create a communication delay. So Mars, at the furthest point in the orbits, can be a 20-minute communication delay one way. So you can call home, but they're not going to hear you for 20 minutes, and you're not going to get a response for another 20 minutes. So that creates a whole lot of difficulty around needing to be more autonomous from the ground, so not having mission control help, as well as not having resupply, so you're having to bring everything with you that you're going to need. The 5th one is the one that I deal the most with as a psychologist, is isolation and confinement. And I think this is something that we all had a little bit of a taste of during the kind of heavier lockdown periods of the pandemic, of just really being socially isolated from each other, physically isolated from from other resources, kind of having a sense of sensory deprivation where we're not getting our full sensory experience out in the world like we usually would. You can have sleep and circadian changes because you're not getting all the cues from your natural environment, especially sunlight environment, to help keep the circadian rhythm in check, as well as difficulties with team processes and team coordination, which I think Dr. Landon had talked about in a previous presentation.